Hi there. My name is Charlie O'Donnell, and I am a partner at Brooklyn Bridge Ventures, a pre-seed and seed stage firm in New York City. Basically, we back any New York City area company that has yet to raise 750 grand in a prior round. So eliminating all the confusion of nomenclature and seed and pre-seed and mango and all of that sort of stuff. Try and make it easy. And, we try and run some informative events that help address some of the questions and issues that our portfolio companies and others in the community come up with. And I'm very excited to have TK here, who is the founder of ToutApp, which sold to Marketo, and who I met 2013?
11. That's when
2011. Wow. 10 years ago. That's like that scene in Grosse Pointe Blank where it's like 10 years, man, 10 years.
And we haven't aged a bit, so.
I'd like to believe that, but
yeah,
we met back in the days of General Assembly as a co-working hub in space, and he's learned a lot about driving B2B SaaS businesses and growing them from scratch and optimizing them, and knows a lot more about it than I do. And so I am going to get out of his way because he's got a lot of information to share. So thanks for joining. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. What's up, everybody? Welcome to today's today's presentation. And it actually came together over Twitter DM. Someone, I think Charlie mentioned it, and someone tagged me, and I'm like, hey, I can do this. And we kind of chatted back and forth. So I'm really excited about how this came together. I want to thank all of you guys for joining. I have one promise for you guys today. I'm going to teach you how to build a scalable go-to-market machine for your SaaS business to drive growth. Super simple, but it's actually hard to do. And so I'm going to walk you through the 3 key components that go into it and how you can apply it. A little bit of background on me, and in case we haven't met before, this is the first time you're coming across my content or my background. I've been in SaaS for the last 15 years. I started my first SaaS company called HipCal while I was in college. It was acquired by a company called Plaxo. Then I worked at Bridgewater, one of the best hedge funds in the world. Then I started a company called ToutApp. We made software for salespeople. We started the sales engagement space. We were backed by Andreessen Horowitz. I grew that company to about 7 million ARR. Went through a ton of twists and turns, learned a ton about growing SaaS businesses to get to that point. And then we actually got acquired to a company called Marketo. Marketo was the leader in marketing automation. They wanted a sales engagement platform, so combined the two. It was backed by Vista at the time, a private equity company. I was SVP of Strategy at Marketo. We did a 2-year transformation. We sold it to Adobe. So that was my 10-year journey, essentially, of building SaaS businesses, plus the other 5 with Bridgewater and Plaxo and HipCal. But the last 10 years have really been about ToutApp and Marketo. So I've built revenue software. I've worked with a lot of software companies that were using our platforms. And I also was owning revenue in a lot of cases. So all the things that I'm going to be teaching you come from these core 15 years as a founder, a venture-backed CEO, a senior executive across multiple SaaS businesses. So everything I tell you comes from this experience. I'm going to be distilling my core principles around this. Now, when I'm not giving presentations like this, I also run the fastest growing B2B SaaS YouTube channel. We cover everything from go-to-market to pricing strategy to building an ideal customer profile to creating a sales funnel. We have over 11 videos on go-to-market strategy itself, over 6 videos on strategic planning around growth, and we do 2 new episodes every week. So a lot of the stuff that I'm sharing with you here, I go into a lot more in-depth into these videos, so be sure to subscribe over there. It's just at tkkader.com/YouTube. You can just subscribe there. Okay, so SaaS businesses. Primarily what I focus on is how do you build scalable SaaS businesses, right? And the main thing that I've learned if there's one thing that I've learned is great SaaS businesses rely on these 3 key pillars. You need a great product, which we all agree as founders, we know we need. You also need to be in a right market, and then you need a proper go-to-market. And if you ignore one of these 3, you won't succeed. For the times where I struggled as a SaaS founder, I over-indexed on product. and I didn't think enough about market and go-to-market. For the times where I built a great product, but it never went anywhere, which don't make it in the highlight reel that I just showed you, it's because the market was terrible. So I'm going to show you how you need to actually think about all three of these things to actually drive growth and have a scalable go-to-market machine. So that's what's going to be what we're going to be focusing on. So hopefully that you're excited. So essentially, there's these three key principles. I'm going to walk you through each of them one at a time in this presentation. The first principle is around how you need a proper market strategy. The second principle is you need a proper product strategy that supports your go-to-market. You need a certain kind of product so you can actually sell it. And the third is you need a proper go-to-market strategy. And I'm going to dig into all three of this in the hour that we have together and change. And hopefully we'll have some time for Q&A in the end. But if you have questions as I'm going through this, put it in the Q&A and I'll try and sneak them in the meantime as well. I want to make sure this is interactive for you and valuable for you. So who's ready to dig into market strategy? Because that's the first one. If you're ready, hit me with a yes. That way I know you're with me, and then we're going to jump into market strategy. Okay, so we're getting a bunch of yeses, so that's awesome. Oh, you guys, okay, the room is alive. Cool. All right, so there's three reasons people buy, and you want to make sure before you start. By the way, I've been a founder, and I'm an engineer. All right, so nothing I value more than product. So I hear you, but at the same time, here's the thing: market matters more than anything else. Even if you're building a go-to-market machine, you can take, and I've seen this in my 15 years of doing startups and building businesses. You can take a pretty good product, and you can take a mediocre team. If they're in a great market, they'll still win. They'll get pulled through the market forces. On the other hand, if you're in a crappy market and you have a phenomenal product, the product is beautifully created, it's the best freaking product you've ever used, and it's the most talented team that's ever done. They have multiple exits, and they're now like, we have to solve this problem. But if the market's not there, it won't matter. So market is where I always start. And the thing that I always say is there's only three reasons people buy, okay? I'm going to give you the three reasons people buy. People buy to either get laid, get made, or get paid. Everyone knows this, right? Now, here's the thing. If you're in B2B SaaS, if you're particularly B2B SaaS, business enterprise software, which is what I know the most, is why I talk about it. I never talk about things I've never done before. There's really three reasons that businesses buy. They want to get paid. Then they will buy either because there's cost savings to be had, or there's growth. They'll make more money, or they'll save money, or they'll reduce risk. And this is literally the first thing you really have to nail in your scalable go-to-market machine, regardless of how amazing your product is. You need to understand, what is your product at the end of the day, when all is said and done, what is it really doing? Is it going to help them save money, truly? Is it going to help them make more money, or is it going to reduce risk? Because that will determine everything else that comes from here. And you really have to own that. Now, there are a couple more things that go into really laying down your market strategy as part of your go-to-market, right? And a lot of times people skip over this. This is why I put it first. By the way, I'll totally admit, this is boring stuff. This is not exciting. It's not like, oh my God, it's super boring. But you don't need the one thing I learned is you don't need a PhD. You don't need to be super smart to build enterprise software. I don't have a PhD. I'm not that smart. But what you need is just have discipline. So what you need to make sure is understanding what your core value is. First of all, thinking about what is it that your business really doing? Is it saving money, making more money, or reducing risk? You also want to make sure that there's enough people that need this, right? If there's a small group of people, it's super niche. There's not you need to make sure you have an appropriate amount of TAM. Now, I don't have a view on you have to do VC-backed companies or lifestyle businesses. I hate those terms. The only thing I believe in is building profitable companies. And what you want to make sure is if you're bootstrapped, you need to have an appropriate amount of TAM so that you can bootstrap and be profitable. If you're raising venture capital, you need to make sure you have an appropriate amount of TAM, total addressable market. The market is big enough. So you want to make sure that this problem that you're solving, there's enough people with that problem, and you need to understand who they are and where they live. This is literally step one of your go-to-market machine, and a lot of people skip over it. The second thing I always work with founders to understand is what is the macro trend driving urgency, okay? Now, I started a company called ToutApp. We made software for salespeople. There was a macro trend that drove urgency. This is why ToutApp was successful. This is why sales engagement, which is the category that we created, is expected to be a $5.5 billion space in the next year or two. $5.5 billion. That's an appropriate amount of time for venture capital. There's multiple unicorns, multiple exits in the space by now. So there's a macro trend. The macro trend was, in order to take a lead that you got, someone that raised their hand and downloaded something, it took 7 to 10 touches to convert them to a real opportunity. And those touches had to be over email, over phone, over social. All those touches. That was a macro trend that sales leaders and marketing leaders were realizing. They would pay tons of money to get a lead, but to turn that lead to a real opportunity would take so many touches. That was an example of a macro trend that was driving urgency. I did an investment in a company last year, and they grew like 300% over the last year. What do? Well, they go to companies and they say, hey, do you store contact info? They're like, yep, we do. Do you have email addresses? Yep. So did you know that if you're not GDPR compliant, you can get fined at $20 million, and your contact information is stored in multiple databases? They're like, oh God, that sounds horrible. They're like, great, we sync with all those databases and we can help you get compliant, give us money. And boom, they can sell right away. That is a macro trend. So the question you need to ask yourself, if the first one around your market strategy is, well, are we going to save them money, make them more money, reduce risk? The second one is, what is the macro trend driving that, right? And it all turns into really identifying, is this an urgent and important problem, and how do we communicate that, right? Now, Charlie as a VC will figure out all these things. Is the TAM big enough? Is it an urgent, important problem? Now, VCs will figure this out, but founders also need to articulate this and feed it into their messaging, into their go-to-market process, which is why I always say answer these questions first, because it'll help drive how you communicate and position and message your product. So many people skip over this and they just start sending emails, which we'll talk about. What you want to do is actually make sure you answer even these 3 questions. Then ultimately, you need to know which one do you fall under, your core ROI model. For us, ToutApp, we help them make more money. If they actually didn't generate pipeline, they wouldn't hit their number. And when you can generate more pipeline, they can close more business. So we help them make more money. Same with Marketo. Marketo generated more leads. It helped them make more money. You want to make sure you're completely aligned. The last piece you want to think about is, when you're going after a certain category in a certain space, it's always important to understand what market segment you're going after, because this will determine the type of go-to-market machine you're building. Are you going to have a sales team? Are you going to have an SDR team? Is it an inside sales team? Is it an enterprise team? Or is it just a self-service business and it's going to be more marketing driven? These are not choices you make because you like the color blue and you like enterprise. It's made because you're going after a certain market segment. If you're going after an SMB segment, you're probably going to be more marketing driven. If you're going after an enterprise segment, chances are you need enterprise sales reps, 18-month sales cycles, your deal size have to follow. So thinking about what is the underserved piece of the market is super important for you as you're laying out your go-to-market strategy. Is that making sense? Now, all of these things, fairly obvious when I write it out, but I found that 96% of startup founders don't do them. And in fact, the stat is only 4% of companies that raise a seed round go on to raise a Series A. 96% will have built a product, raised seed, built a cool website, sold some revenues, sold some business, but still never raised a Series A. And the reason for that is they don't think about their market strategy. If you nail your market strategy first as part of your go-to-market, then everything else falls into line in a lot more efficient way. Are you guys starting to see that? Can you start to see how just thinking about some of these important questions right up front will help you write better emails, will help you write better ads, will help you have a better sales deck, will help you have a better value proposition. Just by knowing, like, hey, here's a big thing that's happening. Here's why you need to pay attention to us. Or knowing whether they're going to make more money or save money or reduce risk. Or knowing what is a macro trend that's happening. All of these things feed into everything else you're going to do down the line when you're executing in your go-to-market machine. So that's market. Now, how do you codify all this? I'm a big believer in having an ideal customer profile. Now, everyone thinks they have an ideal customer profile, but most don't. They don't write it down. It's not detailed enough. An ideal customer profile, especially in the early stages, is the trifecta of these 3 things. They have the problem that's urgent and important. They have money to spend. They're not broke, because don't sell to broke people. And they're early adopters, because your software is probably not perfect. Let's be honest. When you have the trifecta of these 3, that's your niche. That's your very specific ideal customer profile. So if you're at $1 million ARR right now and you're looking to get to 3 million, the people that are likely to buy to get you from $1 million to 3 million that fits these 3 criteria is your ideal customer profile. And that's what you want to really focus in on and write it down. Now, ideal customer profiles go into firmographic and demographic, like how big is the company? That's your market segmentation. Where do they live? Is it a certain region? You should write that stuff down. An ideal customer profile also goes into what is your dream 100? What is literally the name of the 100 companies or people that you want to sell to get to the next stage of revenue? So many people don't even do that. And all you need to do is just make a list of those. A couple of other things that really go into fleshing this out, your ideal customer profile, is thinking about intent. There are platforms out there like Bombora, B-O-M-B-O-R-A. You can go sign up for them. You can pay them money. And every week, they'll tell you a list of companies that have expressed intent in a certain category. So if you want to find out all the companies that are interested in buying CRM software right now, Bombora will tell you. They'll charge you, but they'll tell you. Second thing to think about is triggers. I remember one of the best cold calls I ever got. One of the best cold calls. We had just raised our Series A. We just did a press release on hiring our VP of Sales, and I get a cold call. And I answered it, and then they're like, hey, TK, I'm so-and-so. I forget his name, but I remember the call. They're like, congrats on raising the Series A. Congrats on hiring a VP of Sales. Super excited for you. I'm like, well, thank you. And he's like, hey, listen, I'm a recruiter. I specialize in recruiting VPs of marketing. My guess is that's next on your list. Would you like to meet? And that was amazing. That was incredible. And the reason that was incredible was because he understood the right trigger. He knew that when a company raised money, and they already had their VP of Sales. The VP of Sales is going to want leads. So you'll need a VP of Marketing, and he called me. That's an example of a trigger. So thinking about what are the triggers that drives a customer to really need you right now, where it becomes urgent and important, is super, super powerful. Someone asked, what was the name of the platform for finding? It's called Bombora, B-O-M-B-O-R-A. The last one is technographics. Well, one of the things we knew at ToutApp was that if they were using Salesforce and they were using Marketo, they needed us next. That means they had a CRM, they had marketing automation, they had a bunch of leads, and those leads needed to be engaged with, so ToutApp would do that and update Salesforce with it. And that was powerful. So we always knew when they purchased those two things, they were more likely to purchase us, so we always went after them. We also knew that when they hired a VP of Sales, they would want to make sure they streamlined their sales process, so we would go after them. So these are super important things for you to understand as you're developing your ideal customer profile for your market strategy. The last thing we did, now if you've got a bunch of salespeople, if you're a little bit farther along, we did this on Marketo. It was incredible. Like I learned this on Marketo, and it was awe-inspiring. A lot of times salespeople will chase deals you know is not good for your company. When you really hone in on your ideal customer profile, what you'll start to see is people that are outside of that profile, the win rates are lower, your churn is higher, the deal sizes are lower, and how long it takes to close the deal is way longer. All the worst things, it's the worst. So what we started to do at Marketo was we said, if you do a deal that's in the ICP, within the ICP, we will commission you at 100%. If you do a deal that is outside of the ICP, we will commission you at 80%. Meaning if you do a deal that we know is terrible, but you're going to go after it anyway, you make less commission. And boom, just like that, overnight, everyone started doing ICP deals. And everything in our sales process started to do better. So if you really want to commit to your ICP, write it down, think about these different vectors, and then actually commit to it and build it into the commission plan. So those are the core things. That's sort of secret number one. Figure out your market first. Remember, if you're in a crappy market, you can have the best team, the best product, the best go-to-market, it still won't matter. It'll be a slog uphill. But if you really think strategically about the market and figure out what are the key components around it, build it into your ICP, then everything else will get accelerated. Are you guys starting to see this? So that's market. Now I want to talk a little bit around what you can do in your product to make sure you have a scalable go-to-market machine. So the first piece was market. The next one is product. Then we'll go deeper into go-to-market. So who's ready for product? If you are, hit me with a yes, say product, while I take a sip of tea. Okay, cool. I do like the energy here. You guys are awesome. So here's the thing. Some products are really hard to sell and hard to buy, and some products are easy to sell and easy to buy. You want to have a product that's easy to sell and easy to buy. And I made this mistake. I learned this the hard way. For the startups that didn't go anywhere, we kept adding more features. We kept thinking that we were just this one feature away. As soon as we do this one more feature, everything's going to be crazy. And the seas will part. And everyone's going to be like, oh my God, I need your product. And that never really happened. It was never that one more feature. And I know some of you, you don't have to admit it. If you want to admit it, say I and put it in the chat. I know some of you are nodding your head right now because I know you're probably stuck in that one more feature trap. You're like, if I just do this one more feature, then everything's going to go boom. The truth is it won't. It's going to add more complexity. It's going to get more complicated. One person said not I. Well, that's good. So real simple. I don't want to go too much into product because it's a go-to-market presentation, but one of the core things you need to do is make sure that you figure out what is the problem you're solving. Right? We talked about this in the market, the urgent and important problem. What is the result people are looking for? And what is the aha moment along the way? And how many clicks does it take to get there? If your product doesn't have a core loop that says, do this, do this, do this, and then boom, aha, you get an aha, and then you go closer to a result, then it's going to be really hard to buy and hard to sell because people aren't going to get it. They're like, I don't know, maybe. If it's like a long haul to like get there. But if you can reduce that aha to as few clicks as possible, then everything's going to change for you. The thing that people don't realize is no one wakes up in the morning and says, I really want more enterprise software. No one wants that. No one wants more enterprise software. No one cares. Now, what you want is a certain result. And what you want to start to understand is what is the result and how can we streamline it so you get it in as few clicks as possible. That is super, super important. And ultimately, what I remind founders is, look, yours is the thing. But you want to understand is I use the thing so that I can blank. And blank is what people really care about. And you want to take away two things on this. One, when you're crafting your product strategy and your product loop, you want to make sure that people get to the thing about the thing as fast as possible. The other thing is when you're communicating your product, your messaging, your ad copy, your website, all those things, you want to talk about the thing, not the thing. Now, another way to say this, which everyone understands, is don't talk about the features, talk about the benefits. But people assume they understand what that means, which is why I try to say it in a different way. Talk about the thing that they care about, right? And that will actually accelerate your go-to-market machine. So the mantra that you need to have is build your product so it is easy to buy. Make it one core loop. Don't add complicated features. The more features you add, especially in the early stages, the harder it is to communicate, the harder your message is, the harder it is for people to wonder if that's what they really need. You don't want that complexity. You want to make it as easy to buy as possible. The second thing to understand, and this will craft into how you position your product and how you message your product, is at the end of the day, there's only 3 types of SaaS. Literally only 3 types of SaaS businesses, especially in the B2B. Now, you can say you have a unique snowflake. I will categorize you into one of these 3. And one is more valuable than the other 2. So the first type is a system of record. System of record. This is where you write stuff down. This is how the business runs. Everything that the business is doing is written down in the system of record. Every department has a system of record. Every vertical has their own type of system of record for their own department. So you want to think about, are you a system of record? Now, if there's already a system of record, so for us, we primarily sold to enterprise software companies and high growth companies. They already had a system of record. They had a CRM. What ToutApp was a system of engagement. We said, look, everyone's already writing down what they're doing in the CRM, but it's a pain in the ass to email people 8 times or call people 8 times. So we're going to help them run that workflow. We're going to help them do it 8 times. And when they do it, we'll automatically write it down in the system of record. And that became a system of engagement. Now, CRM companies are worth a lot more than engagement companies, but that's still okay. There's still multiple unicorns in systems of engagement. There's multiple unicorns in system of record, but one is more valuable than the other. So system of record is where things get written down. System of engagement is where the work gets done. And the last one is system of decision. These are not nearly as valuable as the other 2, but still they're good. Systems of decision are essentially products where it helps people analyze the data and make decisions. This is your analytics tools. This is your dashboarding tools. This is like your Tableau, essentially. So if you already have a system of record in your target market, there's already a system of engagement, and you have to do a system of decision. Systems of decision will get more valuable as AI gets better, but right now they're okay. But ultimately, you want to understand what you're really selling because this will help you craft your messaging in the market and position it the right way and understand your competitors. The third thing is you need to have a single player mode. I don't care if you have salespeople or not, you still need to have a single player mode. If it requires an entire department of people to come on all at once, that means you need multiple players to get value out of your product. So you always want to think in terms of what is the single player mode? How do we make it where, whether it's self-service or product-led growth or sales-driven, whatever you want to call it, whatever stage you're at, someone should be able to get in the product and get value on their own. They should be able to sync their data and get some sort of an aha moment. If you can do that, your product demos will be better. Your trials will be better. Your pilots will be better. All those things will come together a lot nicely. a lot nicer. We talked about quickest path to AHA, and we talked about avoiding the one more feature trap. Those two things we've covered. That's what you want to think about in terms of product strategy. And what I want you to understand is market trumps everything else. If you don't have the right market, go-to-market won't matter, product won't matter, right? So once you have the market, then it's some nuances around product. You can have an easy-to-sell product, an easy-to-buy product, or a hard-to-sell product and a hard-to-buy product. So it's super important. What I learned is look at your product, make sure it's easy to buy. And the way you do that is implement some of these things, some of these thinkings, so that your product strategy is a lot tighter. Okay, so we covered market, we covered go-to-market. Now we're going to get into the meat of it, which is we've covered market, we covered product. Now we're going to get into the meat of it, which is the go-to-market. So who's ready to dig into that? Any questions on market or product before we move forward? Hit me with a yes if you want me to start on the go-to-market now. Okay, cool. Boom. You know, you guys are good. You guys are really great. Someone said, can you share single player mode once more? Single player mode, all it means is if I have to go convince 4 more people to get value, to start using the product to get value out of it, then that's bad. So find a way where one person can use the product and get value, and then they're like, oh my God, this is valuable. How do I add more people? That's what I mean by single player mode. So it's kind of like if you think about your product as a video game, can you play it yourself and then convince a friend? Or in order to understand what the video game is about, you got to convince 3 other people to join. You don't want the latter that makes it harder to sell. That's the core thing. Okay, we're going to jump into go-to-market. Now, first of all, before I tell you, now that we have your product ready, you know you're in the right market. Now it's like, all right, how do I build go-to-market, right? Now there's some traps. Before I tell you what to do, I'm going to tell you what not to do. And really more importantly, I'm going to tell you what everyone does, and that's why they screw up. And I did this, and I learned the hard way, so I don't want you to make the same mistakes, which is why I talk about this stuff. Now, there's certain ways that you can go. There's like certain ways you can go to market, right? Once you have your messaging right, and you're like, how do I go to market? The most appealing thing, like I was SVP of Strategy, and as part of that, and I did a million things at Marketo. One of the things I did was I ran channel, right? We ran our Marketo's channel alliances. We had a $36 million revenue number. And the year that I ran it, that was our largest year ever for channel, which is really cool. Channel is super awesome because you get other people to sell your stuff. It's super appealing, especially as a startup founder who doesn't have a lot of money right now to build out a full sales team. Channel is super appealing. You can go into marketplaces, you can get people to resell, you can white label your product, you can co-sell it. Literally other people are selling for you. The problem is there's going to be a lot of people that tell you like, oh yeah, channel, let's partner. They're never going to do anything. So this will become a huge waste of time. So one of the things you'll find early on, if I can, oh, there we go, is channels are the most attractive, but they won't go very far, okay? So in the early days, look at marketplaces. Like if you can hack your way through the Chrome Web Store or like the App Exchange, and do it. But otherwise, most of the time, or the Shopify store, I think it's still early days. Most of the times, channels don't work. So you have to go direct. Direct means you got to go build out your own marketing and sales chops and go approach people and sell it to them, right? Now you can do either inbound or outbound. Inbound, you can do SEO, and everyone's like, oh my God, we're gonna hire a content person. We're gonna blog every week, and we're gonna get so much SEO and so many leads, and everyone's gonna buy. And that never works because SEO, it can take 12 months or more to pay off. So you're wasting your time, right? And no one wants to read another blog post. Like they just don't. There's too many blog posts. You can go onto social and start posting. Sometimes that works. That actually works pretty well if you can do it right. You can run ads, but if you don't know what you're doing with ads, you'll fork over all your money to Mark Zuckerberg, and you'll have to go back to Charlie for more money, and he's going to ask you, what'd you do with the money I gave you? And he's going to be like, well, Mark Zuckerberg took 70% of it. And that's kind of what happened. So there's traps there. You can then say, you know what, we're going to go outbound. You can buy an emailing tool like ToutApp, or right now Outreach and SalesLoft are the #1 players in that space. If you're a Marketo customer, you can go buy Marketo Sales Connect, which is ToutApp. You can go cold call people. You can send them in a FedEx envelope, and those are ways you can get in touch with them with varying levels of cost. Here's the thing, though. This is the biggest trap. Like you can go do SEO, but that's a 12-month payoff. Channels, no one will pay attention to you. You can do social. You can do ads. You can do these. These are viable channels, but here's the trap. Here's what happens. A lot of times, founders and junior marketers and early stage marketing teams that haven't done this before, and by the way, I say this because I made this mistake and I learned from it. You can go in and you can say, all right, cool. Here you go, Mark Zuckerberg. Here's $1,000. Mark Zuckerberg's like, sweet, thanks a lot. He's going to give you all these dashboards and charts, and it's going to show people liked it and clicked on it, but there's no money coming out on the other side, right? You can go to a sales engagement platform and say, hey, here's $1,000. Like, cool, sounds good. Here, go ahead and email. And you email 1,000 people. And it shows like a bunch of people opened it, they clicked on it, a bunch of people unsubscribed, some people replied and said, please stop emailing me, but there's no money coming out. Here's the thing that happens. All these machines that exist, right, are optimized for execution. So you can go fire all these bullets and you're like, let's spend $1,000 on ads, $1,000 on emails, and let's hire a content person, do a lot of blogs. You can end up firing and doing a lot of activities, spending a lot of money, but what ends up happening is you end up firing blanks. It's equivalent firing blank bullets. And there's two reasons why this might happen. The first reason this might happen is you didn't aim it in the right place. You didn't do all that stuff I told you to do around market and write down your ideal customer profile. And because of that, you're firing up all these ads, sending all these emails, but you don't really have a thesis on what segment of the market that you need to go after. What's the macro trend? Why is this urgent and important? Who are these people? You didn't do the work. So you just started firing like crazy, spraying and praying. Let's just say you did that, right? The second trap that comes into play is you know exactly who you're targeting and you're firing all these bullets at them, but they're blanks. It's not resonating. People aren't paying attention. And that's the second trap, where you're firing all these bullets. Maybe it's towards the right target. Maybe you did the work, but the messaging's off. The value prop's off. So this is the thing. One of the biggest things that you need to understand is first, get the market strategy right. We talked about that and we talked about how to do that, right? The second is know the difference between go-to-market strategy versus execution. Now, I'll tell you, baby TK from 10 years ago, when he first met Charlie, that was baby TK. He just jumped into execution. Here's a bunch of money, Mark Zuckerberg. Here's a bunch of emails. I was building an email tool to send emails to a lot of people. So I used my own tool. We called it, I used Tout to Tout. And that's what we did. But baby TK eventually learned there's a difference between strategy versus execution. How do you know whether you're spending too much time on execution before you did the strategy? I ask founders, what is your one sentence value prop, right? It's simple, right? What is literally your one sentence value prop? My company, blank, that's the name of your company, creates software for blank, that's your ICP, that helps them blank. Can you answer that sentence and fit it on an index card? If you are running out of ink, if you're trying to flip over the index card to write more, you don't have the strategy right. If you can succinctly finish that sentence, that means you've done some work on strategy, but maybe you need to round it out. And that's the difference. A lot of people start firing blanks, start on the execution without thinking in terms of go-to-market strategy. What is go-to-market strategy? Go-to-market strategy is what is your positioning and messaging? Go-to-market strategy is what is your value proposition? Can you figure out this one sentence? Go-to-market strategy is what is your strategic narrative? When you have your strategic narrative, it actually fleshes out a lot of important parts of your marketing. I'll talk about that. And all of this complements what is your market segmentation, which we talked about on the market strategy, which segment of the market, and what's your ICP and Dream 100. If you haven't done these pieces and you jump into execution, this is the biggest trap that founders face. And founders, it's not your fault because you've never done sales and marketing. You raised $3 million, which means that you can only afford a junior marketer or someone that really hasn't done it before. Right? The top marketers you can't afford them at $3 million. And so you're kind of making the same mistakes and it's not your fault. The problem is you don't have the quality people that will tell you otherwise to think about the strategy before you think about the execution. So let's jump into a little bit more on how this comes together, right? You need to make sure you have the strategy before you go into the execution. Now, what does that look like? When it comes, and this is all I do these days because I learned this the hard way and I realized this is an endemic problem for all SaaS founders. So there's three critical components. Number one, we talked about this, right? You need to have your ideal customer profile. Now, number two, before you start executing towards that ideal customer profile, you need to have your strategic messaging down, right? Now, this goes into your positioning. This goes into your value proposition. How do you define these? Well, it comes from the research you did on your macro trends. What are the big things happening in your market? Why is this an urgent and important problem? Do you help them save money or make more money? Is this a system of record or a system of engagement? When you do all those things, creating your strategic messaging becomes 10 times easier. You actually have to flesh out your positioning, your value proposition. And when you do that, excuse me, all of this stuff flows into your sales deck, your email copy, your ad copy, your website copy. This is one of the funniest things. I'll tell you this. Like 9 out of 10 times when I get on a call with a SaaS founder because they wanted to apply to work with me, and I'll always say this. Now it's almost a joke. I say this just to get a reaction. I'll say like, oh, cool. Like, thanks for getting on the call. Here's how I run the call. By the way, I'm on your website. 9 times out of 10, here's how I know when they're ready to work with me. 9 times out of 10, the founder will say, oh, where are we doing it? And we're redoing it. Like I used to say this too. I know exactly what it is. It means like we have no freaking idea how to position it, and we're in a constant state of flux for our website because we don't have our positioning right. We don't have our strategic messaging right. So this is super important. Like we all suffer through it, but it's important to actually nail this down. That's the second component. You want to get your strategic messaging. So the biggest part of go-to-market, right? You want to make sure that you have your market strategy right, product strategy right. And when you're going to go-to-market, get your strategic messaging right before you get into executing. I'll teach you how to execute right after this, but that's super important. The third piece is you should run a Broadway show. I learned this from a guy named Russell Brunson. What most startups and a lot of inefficient organizations do is every week they're like, what are we going to do this week to get attention, right? Like they're doing this crazy thing every week and they're making it up every week. The best companies that do marketing and sales well, they have a scalable go-to-market machine. They run one consistent Broadway show every week. A Broadway show is this thing where it's like this big production. It's highly rehearsed, great talent, and they just run it over and over and over and over and over. And every week there's more people discovering it, more people that are coming, and they're gaining momentum. And what you want to switch from is doing this ad hoc marketing and sales activities to running a Broadway show. How do you run a consistent set of Broadway shows? Well, first piece, you actually have your strategic message down. You know exactly who you're targeting, and every week you target those new people in that group with the same messaging, with the same show. So those are the 3 critical components that really bring these together. So when you think about your market, then your product, you get into go-to-market, these are the 3 things that come together. Are you guys getting this? Does this make sense? Isn't this awesome? It's, I feel like this kind of education should come with, I've raised $15 million. I wish my $15 million Series B check came with this education. Like, it's not always obvious. So having done this a billion times through all the companies, I learned this the hard way. And now I help startup founders do this. I kind of broke this down into a framework, and I call it my unstoppable sales funnel. You'll have to excuse the cheesy name. I put unstoppable links to everything. That's how I brand it. But I call it my unstoppable sales funnel. You figure out your ICP, you figure out the macro trends, and you figure out your strategic messaging, and you run a Broadway show. The biggest piece for an unstoppable sales funnel is what I call a manifesto. A manifesto is essentially a 9 to 10 slide deck. It's a deck that's your manifesto. Here's the thing. As a startup founder, you woke up one morning and you realized that you could solve a really important problem. And you saw something. You saw something that most other people didn't. And the biggest part of marketing, without overcomplicating it, is to show people the same insight that you got, to get them to that same aha moment. And so what I do is I teach people how to create a manifesto. When you create a manifesto, it's about 10 slides, it essentially distills down why you guys exist. It distills down what your solution is, what the big problem is, what happens if someone doesn't do anything about it. And when you do that, you actually have a clear strategic narrative that gives you clarity in what you do. It gives your team clarity. It gives your board clarity. It helps with your website messaging, so you're not constantly changing it. Your investment pitch deck becomes clearer, and you can now mobilize it through your Broadway show. So every week, you take that manifesto, and you say, like, my manifesto is my 5-point SaaS growth strategy guide. That's my manifesto. It talks about how to grow SaaS businesses effectively. Every week, I run a Broadway show that drives more people to my manifesto. And when people look at my manifesto, they want to go buy from me, or they want to talk to me, and that's how it works. And by the way, I didn't make this up. I learned this. Marketo did this. They wrote their manifesto. The founders of Marketo wrote a book called Demand Generation. I forget the actual name, actually. Revenue Generation, something like that. The HubSpot guys wrote a book. Benioff wrote a book. At ToutApp, we wrote our own book around sales engagement. We always wrote a manifesto, and that's how we created those categories and educated people, and that's why we became well-known brands in our categories. That's how it works. And so you need to craft your manifesto. How do you craft your manifesto? Well, I have a whole YouTube video on this. It goes into a lot of detail. I can't go into all of it in an hour presentation, but the gist of it is really talking about all the core things I've talked about: macro trends, core ICP, key result. All those go into the manifesto to really craft your strategic narrative. The biggest thing between a standard lead magnet and a manifesto is this: a manifesto leaves a reader feeling, man, if I don't do this, then I'm going to lose out on something. That is the biggest difference. So when you actually combine the strategy with the execution, then you get revenues. And in the early stages, what I always say is focus on inbound social, do outbound email, send in FedEx envelope if your deal sizes are big enough. And then as you start to generate revenues, then spend money on ads. And then once you start to get momentum here, then the channels will start to pay attention and you can start going into co-selling or marketplaces to see what works. And literally how all of this stuff comes together, I took you from market to product to go-to-market, is you should write a manifesto. You should hone in on your messaging, your positioning, the most right segment of the market. You should build that ideal customer profile, and then you should run a Broadway show every week through inbound social and outbound, and that will actually help you generate revenues. That's your go-to-market machine. And once it starts to click, the messaging clicks, the ICP clicks, all that stuff is clicking, then you run ads, you can scale with outbound and then partnerships. That's how it goes. Now let's visualize this in a subtle way. This is how this all comes together. Everything I just taught you, right? There's one small point that I actually want to say before I jump into that. My approach to marketing and sales and go-to-market is very simple. I'd like to out-teach. Not outspend, but out-teach. When you out-teach, people trust you more. When people trust you more, they buy from you. When they buy from you, they're successful. And when they're successful because you taught them, not just gave them something they don't need, then they're going to refer. Everything comes together in a much nicer way. So what I would say is this actually doesn't require, this is not a very expensive go-to-market machine. This actually just forces you to just teach, out-teach. So even if you have a competitor that's funded way more, like a ToutApp, we had competitors that were way more funded, but we still kicked their ass. Why? Because we taught the market. We created this category because we taught the market. So out-teach instead of outspend. That's super important. I want to pull together everything we covered, all right, into this one graphic. Everything we've talked through since the beginning. We're at 40 minutes in, right? And I want to make sure there's time for Q&A. Step one, get your market strategy right and codify it into an ICP, your ideal customer profile. Step two, create your manifesto, your messaging, your positioning. Actually get that strategy down before you think about executing. Don't just jump into executing and giving Mark Zuckerberg all the money that you have. And then step three, run your Broadway show. How do you run your Broadway show once you have that manifesto? Well, there's essentially 4 critical ways. Number one, go to your existing customers or people in your ICP that you already know and ask them. It's like literally send them your manifesto and ask them for referrals. Literally say, hey, here's what we're doing. Who else do you know? Here's our manifesto. Like, can you please introduce me to one referral? That'll guaranteed get revenues. Number two, go on LinkedIn. Connect with people in your ICP. Do 1 to 3 posts every week. Link to your manifesto. The manifesto will take them to a landing page. You'll nurture them, and you'll get leads that way. Also, if anyone engages with you, DM them and say, hey, here's what we do. Let's chat. Here's our manifesto. Number 3, outbound email and phone. Load up new targets every day, every week of people in your ICP. Put them on a multi-touch email sequence. Add in phone if that's your audience, if your audience warrants it, and give them your manifesto. And number 4, once these 3 are working because you did all the work, then scale with ads, because you know if you spend money, you're going to get that money back. You're not going to lose all of it. And all of this will essentially lead into either a free trial or a one-on-one discovery call or strategy call or a webinar once you scale it. And as you're doing all this, you're going to collect the data and you're going to keep going back to your ICP, your messaging, and your Broadway show. And you're going to keep collecting data, drawing insights, and iterating. And as you talk to more people, they're either going to buy or they're going to say no, and you're going to learn and you're going to iterate. And over time, you're going to get better and better and better. And as this starts to kick in, as revenues start to flow, then you can start to hire SDRs and AEs and put more money into ads. This becomes completely scalable, but it's the same activity, same Broadway show that you're running. You're just doing it at a bigger scale with more people. Are you guys getting this? So first of all, do you see how all this connects? From market to product to go-to-market to this thing. This is your scalable go-to-market machine. This is how it all comes together. So if you're starting to see the power in this, put 1 in the chat. I'd love to hear. And then we'll start to close out on some thoughts that I have as well. Okay, cool. There's one more thing that you got to think about, all right? A lot of people forget this. Like they get into this. And by the way, the technology for this is not that complicated. Get a marketing automation solution, get a sales engagement solution, and boom, you run this whole thing. You don't need anything else. Those are the 2 things you need. And I worked at Marketo. They're one of the best marketing automation solutions. And I started ToutApp. They're one of the best sales engagement solutions. And there's a million of them out there. So just choose the one you want. And the reason I know this is because I built these categories in different ways. So there's one more thing you got to think about. Okay. You're probably undercharging. Here's the one thing that drags down all go-to-market machines: price. You're probably understanding. I remember this one time, ToutApp was in a bit of trouble. We almost died. And I was meeting with two of our investors. I was meeting with Mark Andreessen and Ben Horowitz. And literally we're in a room. It's me, Mark over here, Ben over here. There's a robot thing with an iPad with someone else dialing in. And Mark is like, all right, TK, we just want to know what's going on. Like, walk us through it and let's talk through it and let's figure out what we can do. And I'm like, cool, well, here's what's going on. And I'm like ready for like some crazy, insane advice. And Ben is just kind of like, you know what, I just really wish every single company in our portfolio would do. I just wish they would just raise their prices. Just raise your prices. And literally, that was the outcome of the meeting. They were like, everything's great. Just like raise your prices and all the unit economics will come into play. That's it. And that's when I realized, and this is what like Ben made me realize, like you need to be intentional about your pricing strategy. And you need to raise your prices. So number one, you're probably undercharging, charge more. Like just do it. One of the things I work with founders on is their pricing strategy, and it's almost always easy, like double it. And then there's more nuances there, but that's a start. And optimize for net dollar retention. If you look at some of the most successful SaaS IPOs, all of them had greater than 100% net dollar retention. What does net dollar retention mean? If they bought and they spend $1, the following year, they spend $1.58 or $1.10 or whatever it is. Snowflake, one of the most successful IPOs, they're at 158% net dollar retention. So you want to optimize for that. How do you do that? Well, first of all, be intentional about your pricing strategy. You're either the cheapest, and now you have to go after lots of volume, or you're the most expensive. Charge more. I'm always a big fan of being the most expensive. Second, we kind of know this, add denominators to your price. Now, the default is per user. But for example, ToutApp was per user, number of salespeople. That was easy. Marketo, they were like, look, there's only 5 people in a marketing team. We don't want to wait around for the prices to increase. So they did it first by per contact. Literally, per contact they charged you. And then on top of that, charged you per instance. So Europe should have its own instance instead of North America. They don't get a global instance. So that's important. So you can charge per instance, per record, per usage. Think about all those things. With ToutApp, we added valuable add-ons. So you could get the core platform. That was $15K minimum. And then if you wanted the advanced analytics, that would be extra. So add an additional tier so they actually use more. People are always willing to pay for insights and analytics. People are willing to pay for control and auditing. They're willing to pay for training and education. Charge for training and education. Super powerful. And raise prices consistently. Every year you should be raising prices because you're adding more to the platform. That's the power of it. And find a way to tie the price to the business impact. This goes back to the market strategy, right? They're either saving money. How much money are they saving? Well, as long as how much they're spending on you is lower, you're going to be better off. How much more money are they making? Well, based on that, they should be like, it should be a fraction of that, right? Think about the ROI and price accordingly. You're probably undercharging when you think about it that way. So to summarize, there's these 3 things: market strategy, we go back to what I promised you. In order to build a scalable go-to-market machine, get your market strategy down right. Number 2, get your product strategy down right so it's easy to buy, easy to sell. Number 3, get your go-to-market strategy right. Your one unstoppable sales funnel. The one thing I'll say over here is, this is hard. The concepts are simple, but it requires a lot of discipline. It requires a lot of hard work. It requires a lot of iteration. And therein lies the trick. If you're willing to commit to it, you'll go really far. It doesn't require a PhD. It just requires a lot of just repetition and discipline. Discipline is the biggest word. And the thing I always say is, don't try to replicate the best when they're taking the victory. Like look at your heroes and what they look like when they were just literally grinding it out. This is Jeff Bezos grinding it out. Bill Gates grinding it out. Elon Musk grinding it out. This is when they were building. Right now, you see the victory film. So know that. And ultimately, there's just only these 2 levers that matter. You're either shipping code or you're closing deals. Ship code, close deals. Those are the only literally 2 levers. And if you're shipping quality code, then you should be closing more deals. If you're closing more deals, then you'll get a bunch of feedback and ship better code. So that's literally all that matters, and you keep iterating on your strategy. Now, I do have a gift for you. I've been watching the live number count. Everyone's still here. No one's left. So I have a free gift. I have a 5-point SaaS growth strategy guide. Go-to-market is one aspect of this. There's other pieces that make for a successful SaaS business. So I have a 5-point SaaS growth strategy guide. It's completely free, and it'll help you. It'll link to a bunch of my curated YouTube videos. It'll help you create a 1-page growth strategy for your SaaS business. So you can grab a copy of that at getunstoppable.com/strategy. The other thing I'll mention for you guys is, you at this point, you came, you got 50 minutes of like, how do I build a scalable go-to-market machine? You got the 3 components, you got the overall graph, like you have all of that. You have 2 clear options for you. Like you can now go implement this. Like this is literally the steps for a scalable go-to-market machine. Here are the steps. This is what you need to do. Now the question is, what would it take for you to actually do all these things? So you can either do it yourself or you can follow a proven path. And this is why I started Unstoppable. One of the reasons I started Unstoppable is because there's a lot of fake gurus. There's a lot of people that like have never done this. They're like, hey, like buy this thing. And it's like, you can't do it. And one of the biggest problems that exists is you can go join an accelerator and they'll tell you to go talk to 24 mentors, all with different advice. And that's not helpful. Most of the gurus haven't done this. At the early stage, you can only afford junior marketers or fly-by-night agencies, and they don't know how either. Like they'll take your money. The free content gives you the high level, but they don't tell you the framework to follow. And so at the end of the day, go-to-market falls on the founders to figure out, and it's fraught with execution risk. And so I wanted to create a program. I wish this existed when I was doing it. I wanted to create a program that says, all right, cool. To build a scalable go-to-market machine for B2B SaaS, here are the steps, here are the templates, here's the framework, here's the training, go, and I'll coach you through it. And that's essentially what I do inside of my SaaS go-to-market program. So if you got value from any of this, by the way, like, you can go check out all the free YouTube videos. But inside of my go-to-market program, I have a structured way to help you craft your market strategy, your value prop, which is your manifesto, and actually run the Broadway show. So you're welcome. If you want in on that, you can just go to this URL and book a time with me. And I'm happy to explore that with you and see how we can help. It's not cheap, but you make your money back based on one extra deal. So that's how it's structured. So if you're interested in that, obviously we want to make sure we can actually help you. So we get on a call to figure out if it's a good fit, and then we go into that, telling you about the program. All right, cool. So that's what I had for you guys today. I think we have 9 minutes to spare for Q&A. So I'll pause here right now.
I'll jump in with a question. And so one of the folks in the audience asked if you could repost to the link to the guide. So that would be awesome.
A free gift. 1 second, I will pull it up right here. Boom. There we go.
Blank screen. Oh, there you go. Cool. GetUnstoppable.com/strategy. Awesome. Thank you so much. So it sounds like, if I'm sort of reading the tea leaves on, what you were talking about with the sort of junior folks or whatever, that, and I see this a lot, the first full-time marketing hire often doesn't work out for people because they don't necessarily know how to do this strategy. And you essentially wind up with this trade-off between knowing what to do and being able to do the execution. And you try and get it in one person. And it's there aren't that many cheap early stage unicorns able to do both of those things. So which side do you supplement, if you will? Like, is it getting coaching or advising, which is something like you're offering, or working with somebody who's necessarily done it before on a part-time business basis? And then who do you recommend sort of does the execution? Because obviously as a founder, you probably don't have the bandwidth to do it yourself. So I guess my question is like the proper staffing framework for some of this work. Like when you're thinking about like figure out your message, sometimes it's really hard just to have somebody else to bounce it off of.
Yeah, no, I mean, you read the tea leaves, right? Mm-hmm. So, and you've probably seen this a million times. I've seen it too. Founder gets some revenue, or gets it going, raises some money, and they hire a junior marketing person. Except founders never worked with a marketing person, so they don't know it's a junior marketing person. And they don't know the difference between the person they hired and what a world-class CMO does, right? And so you task them with all right, here you go. Here's marketing. Go figure it out. That's usually where it goes wrong. And I think what you have to think about is there's the strategy part and there's the execution part. I think that founders should, and our view is, continue to hire those as best of marketing people you can hire, or even a collection of agencies to do the execution. But the founder needs to be conscious about the strategy piece. And the founder still owns the strategic narrative, the ideal customer profile, and the actual manifesto. Like, those are the key pieces. If you get that right, then the junior marketers and the agencies and the execution will be 10 times more successful. They won't be firing blanks. They'll be targeting properly. And you have a core business strategy that's effective. That's
Gotcha.
the core of it.
So you're either, as a founder, studying up on the marketing strategy piece and getting smarter about it yourself, leveraging people at that world-class CMO or that level to learn from, until you get to the point where you can hire the person who can handle the strategy and carry it all on your own.
There's essentially 3 states. One is not know any better and get the junior marketer to do all that, and then you're screwed. Right. The second one is you try to become a world-class CMO yourself and try to do it alone. That's also bad. And the third is recognize that strategy versus execution, and then make sure you do it and own it, because that's just as important as shipping the next feature.
Gotcha. Cool. A couple questions in the audience. What are some of the other sales and marketing automation tools? You talked about Marketo and Tout. I mean, when you say Marketo, obviously it's pretty feature rich and a large piece of software. Do you think it's worth starting out with something like that, or is it sort of like in the CRM world where there's a couple of tools that people tend to start out with and then they graduate to other pieces?
Yeah, it's a great question. These days, if you're a startup, if you're an early stage startup, you should just get HubSpot. HubSpot has the CRM, it has the marketing automation, it has the sales engagement, it has all 3 of those things, and that's really all you need to get it going. So now you'll need some HubSpot expertise, but it works generally okay. You'll probably outgrow it pretty quickly and get annoyed with it, but more or less, that gives you everything that you need.
Would you recommend, you said, when you do an implementation of HubSpot, finding somebody who can sort of help put it in / teach you the basics before you just, as an individual founder, maybe from a technical background or non-marketing background, just going in and be like, oh, okay, I'm signing up for HubSpot. And then what do I do?
Well, I think this is where the junior marketers are super valuable. Like, hire a junior, there's plenty of junior marketers well-trained on HubSpot. Like, if you give them, here's the messaging, here's the strategy, go do it, they will be able to run with that. But if you tell them hey, go figure out our positioning and messaging and create a landing page and generate that, you'll lose a lot of money. So that's totally right. You shouldn't waste time trying to understand and learn how to use HubSpot. You should just hire someone for that, and you should use that time to actually get the strategy right. Is what I always say.
Gotcha. So Caroline asked a question about channel partners. Is it worth pursuing, or is your advice against it? And I'll jump in with 2 cents, and I'd love to hear your take as well. I think there are 2 types of channel partners. I think there's one where you walk into the situation where it's like, oh my God, I've got this partnership going with Verizon Small Business, right? And Verizon,
so excited.
Right. Verizon will tell you that they have 500,000 small business customers, right? And what that channel partnership essentially winds up being is yes, there is a page somewhere on the Verizon Small Business website that might list you, and you might get listed after 6 months of legal wrangling and all of that sort of stuff. And after all that, you literally get no leads. Yeah. And it is sort of a big waste of time. There's another type of channel partnership. For example, one of my portfolio companies, and it's not in the B2B space, but company called Claire.com was working with somebody in the painting space. So they sell paint on a DTC basis. But a painting network, a network of painters, basically did a partnership with them whereby every single customer who buys paint in a certain geographic area was then presented with, would you like somebody to paint for you? And then they would like send that customer, right? And so it was, that kind of thing. If you can get into the flow of a lot of checkouts, it would be a lead machine for that company. And I think you need to figure out, like, getting into somebody else's flow, I think, is the channel, the big channel thing. That's the pot at the end of the rainbow. And if you can't do that, I think it's going to be really hard.
That's absolutely right. I think there's a lot of people comped to have coffee with you, but their time horizon is 2 years, right? And it's like, cool, like, yeah, we'll totally hook you in, but at the end of the day, no one's going to pay attention to you until you've proven it yourself. But they're comped to have coffee with you. They're literally paid. Like when I ran my channels.
That is a great way to put it. Comp to have coffee with you. That is like a lot of the corp dev folks, a lot of the innovation strategy folks.
At Marketo, I owned alliances and I owned corp dev, and I had people on my payroll, and their job was to meet with startup founders to learn as much about the market. So it fed into my strategy, it fed into my corp dev agenda, and it fed into like which new company should we feature so we get a rev share. Like, I pay them to have coffee with people so we get info, but that very small number of deals actually get done until they've proven themselves. So yeah, like, take the coffee break, but go figure out your market strategy, go direct first, because that's they will be banging down you, because there's a different group of people that'll chase you down. That's a different group of people that are comped for that.
Gotcha. So before I let you go, I'll take Judith's question as the last question. The value of industry expertise in a digital marketing person and an executor versus a more generalized background. Like, do you find people, and not even just like with digital marketing, but even with sales too, do you find people who know your space, or do you find people who have processes of execution?
I mean, look, if someone's literally been in your space and knows it in and out and has the relationships and knows the buyer really well, like, I would rather go for that person, but I would not disqualify the person that's not in your industry, because at the end of the day, what matters more are the core principles around marketing or sales or any other discipline, right? And so a lot of times you're just not going to get the people that are exactly in your specific space. And that's okay. Find people that understand the principles, are coachable, is a culture fit, is willing to learn. Like, those things matter more to me as a leader.
Gotcha. Cool. Well, listen, TK, I really, really appreciate the time. This was fantastic. GetUnstoppable.com/strategy. Really good stuff. And you are followable on the socials, as I know, because that's how you got here. So what's your screen name?
That one's tougher. You can connect with me on Twitter. It's TAWHEED. I'll link to it right here. Boom. TAWHEED. There we go.
Gotcha. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Thanks for having me. This was a ton of fun. Great crowd. Hopefully you guys got value. And Charlie, I will talk to you soon. Hopefully not in another 10 years.
For sure. Sooner than that. Hopefully next time in person.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Take care, man.
Bye-bye.